I was ordered to assassinate the regent. So she disguised herself as a maid, sneaked into the mansion, and put a whole packet of poison in his tea. He held the cup and looked at it for a long time, frowning, and asked tentatively, "Did you thicken it in there?" I was shocked. How is it possible? But when I looked up, I saw the water that was as thick as paste. I immediately retracted my bared teeth. 01. I am Sue Ran, the last female assassin on the killer rankings. After 3 years in this business, no one has ever died from my hands. Because of this, I haven't opened for a long time. Until today, someone suddenly assigned me an assassination mission. He sat down across from me leisurely, holding a thick stack of banknotes in his hand, and began. "I've heard a lot about you. What's your name?" I fought with someone for an hour, and in the end, the other party only suffered some minor injuries. There's no need to mention this anymore. I didn't feel happy at all, and even felt that this person was weird. But he was straightforward and didn't waste any words. He went straight to the point and threw a portrait of the regent on the table. Find a chance to kill him. I took a closer look and said, "I can't do it. This person is my dearest relative and childhood playmate." Bullshit. I'm just so poor that I want to extort more money. Unexpectedly, the man in front of him actually believed it and murmured, "How could this be?" Somehow, I could hear a sense of satisfaction of being needed from his confused tone. So he immediately stopped him from leaving and spoke in a seemingly conflicted tone. "Add money, it can be done. Dear 02. I successfully infiltrated the regent's palace. She became a cleaning maid. During the day, I wielded the broom with great vigor. The housekeepers all said that I was a good candidate. At night, I squatted on the wall to familiarize myself with the terrain. Always be prepared to strike a fatal blow. I observed for a long time and finally waited until he was alone. So he took his tools and jumped in through the half-open window. And then it was stuck in the middle. Oops. The food in the palace is so good that I forgot to manage my body. I looked forward fearfully, but the regent didn't even raise his head and didn't look like he noticed me. From my angle, I could only see his delicate and clear jaw and the corners of his mouth that were twitching constantly and being pressed down hard. I thought about it seriously for a moment and guessed that the content of the memorial was too outrageous. So he endured the discomfort of the congestion in his head and fluttered his legs to squeeze in a few times. As a result, the wooden pole supporting the window loosened and hit me with a bang. The pain made me cry out. It was hard for him not to notice. Finally, the regent put down the book, stared at me for a moment with his dark eyes, and said quietly, "Thief." I was stunned and nodded hesitantly under his gaze. He said considerately, "I'm not ready to rest yet. Please come back later." I was stunned for a few seconds, then rode my donkey down the hill very tactfully. "Good." Then he crawled out grunting. It was fine if he didn't move, but as soon as he moved, all the hidden weapons in his clothes fell out. There was a lot of crackling noises. I helplessly scooped up 2 handfuls in the air with my hands. Finally, she half raised her head and looked into his eyes in silence. "If I say this is a gift for you, would you believe me?" 03. He didn't believe it. Not only that, he gestured to the side and had someone pull me out of the window. It happened so fast that I didn't have time to react. I looked at the man in black in front of me and swallowed hard. Is this the legendary Dark Guard? Why does it look so familiar? While I was lost in thought, the regent strode up to me and pulled off my mask. We were silent again. My vision wandered. His eyes were determined. Slowly, I saw a blush appear on his jade-like face, spreading to his ears. I trembled. "You?" The secret guard looked over and immediately twisted my arm and pushed me to the ground. "How dare you poison me?" A word can wake a dreamer up. Oh, why didn't I think of poisoning? Before I could open my mouth to argue, the regent pushed him away. "The doors and windows are all closed. I just feel a little stuffy." He saw that the other person was still standing aside with a vigilant look on his face. Then he looked at me twice, then suddenly lowered his head in embarrassment, staring straight at his toes. Looking at her face, she doesn't look like a bad person. The secret guard rolled his eyes and pointed at the tools scattered all over the floor. His meaning was obvious. Unexpectedly, the Regent King just closed his eyes as if to give up. So what?
I'm not dead yet.
I looked at him in shock. The reputation of the Regent spread far and wide. Why haven't I heard anyone say that he's not very smart? 04. Although the Regent is stupid, he is actually kind-hearted. Even with all the evidence, he still tried his best to protect me and even took the initiative to find excuses for me. At this moment, he was playing with my short knife with his slender fingers, arguing with the secret guard. Who would be stupid enough to send an assassin hanging upside down from a window? I nodded in agreement. That's right. The secret guard refused to budge. I've seen you on the killer list. This sentence reminded me. In a flash, I finally remembered who this secret guard was. Song Hui, the #1 killer in the underworld. When I was fighting with others, he was the one who stole my head. No wonder there are fewer rumors about him in recent years. It turns out that I am eating public food. I am very disgusted by his behavior, but it is obviously not appropriate to take action at this time. A colleague in the same industry once told me that if you want to save your life, you must first learn to adapt to the changing circumstances. So my brain raced, and I blurted out to the Regent's inquiring gaze. I've changed. I won't kill anymore. After I finished speaking, I recalled the failed assassination attempt and added, No, I've never killed anyone before. The Regent showed an expression of as expected and said calmly, I believe you. Song Hui? Then why did you climb in through the window? I picked at my fingers. It's an occupational disease left over from the past. He still insisted, Why do you have so many weapons? I looked at the various controlled knives on the table, and my lies became more and more handy. Actually, I'm a carpenter. I pulled out the maid's clothes from under my black robe and knelt down with a click. I am grateful to the prince for giving me a job to support my family, so I thought of carving some small things for him. Song Hui silently drew his sword. Absurd. The Regent thought for a moment with great interest and said, Then let's carve a bird. My flattering smile froze on my face. What's going on? Shouldn't he have said, I don't want it, or save your energy and go sweep the floor? How come you agreed so easily? How can my hands, which are only good at wielding swords and knives, do such delicate work? Seeing my complicated expression, Song Hui immediately put his sword across my neck. If I can't carve it, I'll carve your skull. I tilted my head to look at the sword blade that was shining coldly, nodded with a grunt, and retreated. Finally, the Regent called me again. The flickering candlelight reflected that miraculous face, and he opened his thin lips slightly. Go through the main entrance. I jumped down from the windowsill. Yes. 05. The Regent is very busy every day. Naturally, he had no time to supervise me carving birds. So, I rushed to Yuchunyuan the next night. Find the clever and skillful friend Chen Cece. I stated my request briefly. Carve a bird, and I want a big one. Although she was confused, she still nodded in agreement. 2 days later, we agreed to meet under the banyan tree at the back door of the palace. She took out a brocade box from her bosom like a thief and stuffed it into my hand cheerfully. The bird you wanted. I opened it with great anticipation, but after just one look, I almost threw away both the box and the bird. What is this? I couldn't bear to look at that ugly thing anymore, and my face started to burn. I howled, How did you steal the toys of the girls from Yuchunyuan? Her pretty face was full of doubts. You don't want to? Before she finished speaking, she slapped her head and suddenly realized, You are not talking about the dirty stuff on men. Nonsense. She stuck out her tongue and smiled embarrassedly. I misunderstood. Tomorrow, at this time tomorrow, I will definitely send it to you. After saying that, she ran away. I was the only one left standing on the roadside, thinking about how to destroy the body. I looked around and saw a stream next to the road. If I just followed the current, no one would notice me. I did it right away and raised my hand to gather strength. The next second, my hand felt lighter. Song Hui was hanging upside down on the tree, with wisdom shining in his eyes. He suddenly smiled, turned over, jumped onto the wall, and in a few moves he leaped into the palace. Through the wall, I heard his nasty voice. "We caught him red-handed. Now, let's see how you can argue with the prince." Nima, if other people see this, where will I put my beautiful face? I suddenly felt something was wrong. But he was like a mad dog, I couldn't catch up with him. When I knocked on the study door, panting, the brocade box was already wide open and placed on the regent's desk. Song Hui stood far away, with a smug look on his face. The regent rested his chin on his fingers and stared at the contents of the box with a frown. His expression was so serious, as if he had encountered some huge problem. The moment I pushed the door open, two people looked towards me after hearing the sound. Relying on the survival instinct I had developed over the years, I slid to my knees, slipped in front of the regent, and forced out a few tears. This slave deserves death. He leaned back against a chair. The crimson official robe made his appearance even more gorgeous, like a beautiful ghost from the mountains. At this moment, he tapped the armrest with his long fingers and moved his eyes from the box to my face. Song Hui excitedly grasped the knife. "Do you need me to kill her?" The prince interrupted. "You carved it really well." He paused, closed the lid before Song Hui looked over, closed his eyes to calm down and praised. "It's very lifelike." Song Hui? That's a very high valuation. So, he likes it? I didn't dare to speculate on the prince's intentions and glanced at him fearfully. This man's expression could be described as calm, but I always felt that there was a sense of shame and anger hidden in him. Sure enough, he exhaled 2 breaths and deliberately avoided my inquiring gaze. This kind of stunning carving technique is rare. You learned it from Flower House. I answered the question fluently, but he rolled his eyes. It's a good carving. Don't do it next time. 06. Since then, I have somehow gained the trust of the regent. He promoted me and allowed me to serve him personally in the study. Not only is the work easy, but the monthly salary is also 3 taels more than before. Of course, I am 100% willing. What's more, this identity makes it easier for me to implement my plan. The regent had many enemies at court. Those who came to assassinate him were like leaks in the field, one after another. Although Song Hui is conscientious in his duties, he cannot guarantee that he will always be by your side. Being a smart person, I certainly wouldn't waste this great opportunity. So, while he was out tracking down the assassin, I immediately took out my medicine bag. My hand shook, and all the water spilled into the cup. I counted on my fingers silently. 1 mouthful can make a cow faint, so forget it, just kill yourself with medicine. This saves me from having to pay a few more times. I was overjoyed and put the cup of water next to his pile of papers. The regent took it and put it to his lips, but suddenly stopped. He looked at it for a long time with his eyelids lowered, his brows furrowed, and suddenly asked tentatively, "Did you thicken it in there?" I was shocked. How is it possible? But when he looked up, he suddenly saw the picture in the cup. In just a few seconds, the medicine became as thick as paste in the water. I immediately retracted my bared teeth. The regent was extremely calm. Before he could listen to my excuses, he put his thin lips on the rim of the cup. I don't know whether he drank it or not. His Adam's apple rolled up and down, and his dark eyes stared at me without blinking. After a moment, he handed over the cup of water, and his tongue traced the water stains at the corners of his lips, commenting, "This sauce is a bit bitter." Bitter? The boss who sold the medicine clearly said it was colorless and odorless, and it cost me a lot of money. Could it be that Lao Deng lied to me? And why didn't this person react after drinking it? Full of doubts, I secretly dipped my finger in the water in the cup and put it in my mouth and smacked my lips. It's not bitter. I turned around, trying to coax him into taking a few more sips. But the next second, his legs went weak and he fell into the arms of the regent. His handsome face split into many parts in my eyes. I shook my head, wrapped my arms around his neck, and said sleepily, "I feel a little dizzy, let me rest." As soon as I finished speaking, my head tilted, and I fell completely in his arms. As my consciousness was blurry, The regent's voice passed by my ears. "You're in great shape." He stroked my hair and said with a smile, "Fall down and fall asleep."
07.
So embarrassing. I actually slept for 2 whole days. When I opened my eyes again, the regent was checking my breathing, as if he was afraid that I would stay in his room. His eyelashes fluttered slightly, and he withdrew his hand as if nothing had happened. "Are you awake?" I was so embarrassed that I turned around, buried my head in the quilt, and said in a muffled voice, "Yeah." The next second, the bed sank slightly, and the regent lay down with his clothes on, holding me down as I was swaying like a carp. "Don't move." The bruises under his eyes were more severe than before. He placed his large hands on my waist through the quilt, closed his eyes, and sighed. "I took care of you for 2 days, and you ran away as soon as you woke up. You have no conscience." His head was very close to me, his palms patted me gently, and he whispered like coaxing a child, "Sleep with me for a while longer." His voice was very low, and his hot breath sprayed all over my ears when he spoke, making me blush and my heart beat faster. The regent's breathing gradually calmed down. I bit my hand, my mind in a tizzy. What is this? The beauty trap, the self-torture trap, or the 36 stratagems of love? Neither. This is the biggest joke in the world. When I was a maid, I could still say that I was flexible. I didn't expect that I would end up sleeping with someone. If my colleagues knew about this, they would laugh at me for the rest of my life. Thinking of this, I immediately looked around. Fortunately, there was no one on the beam.
Wait.
No one. This is a perfect opportunity for assassination. I touched my body all over. The hidden weapon was taken away by him. The medicine has run out. He even took off the hairpins on his head. The only thing on his body that could be used as a weapon was a belt. Never mind. It's better to have something than nothing. I did it right away. I half-raised myself and pulled my belt happily. Then he felt the loose coat was inconvenient, so he took it off. The next second, he looked into the eyes of the regent again. With a red face, he pulled the quilt between us to cover himself, leaving only a pair of upturned peach blossom eyes exposed. He said weakly, "Don't take it off, I'm scared." That's all. It's better not to explain. 08. Somehow, the regent has been treating me strangely since that incident. First, he asked me to move out of the large bunk bed in the maid's room and move into a side room just separated from his by a wall. He also asked me to enter the palace with him. To be honest, I'm a little scared. Ever since I got into this business, I start to tremble whenever I see soldiers on the street. Not to mention meeting the emperor. But the regent used provocation to me. He said quietly, "As a former assassin, don't you want to go in and take a look openly?" Of course I do, but he saw my hesitation and gave me another strong dose of medicine. The cakes in the imperial kitchen are excellent. I pursed my lips, touched my belly which had grown 2 circles fatter, and said without hesitation, "Go." The emperor was seriously ill and spent almost every day lying on his bed. Through several layers of thick curtains, I could only see a vague shadow. It is as majestic as a mountain, yet it exudes a dead air everywhere. He managed to chat with the regent. There are more twists and turns in the words than in the mountain roads. I was confused by what I heard, but I felt that the saying, "Serving a king is like serving a tiger," was indeed true. I was yawning out of boredom when I suddenly heard him say, "Princess Pingyin has been fond of you for many years. I am thinking of arranging a marriage for you. Besides, she is a vegetarian and a Buddhist, which can help you to atone for your sins of killing." I shuddered and lowered my head in thought. The regent led troops to fight in wars in his early years, and many people died. The emperor's idea is certainly good. But the 4 words, "eat vegetarian food and chant Buddhist scriptures," lingered in my heart for a long time. I really like the braised pork elbow and sweet and sour fish in fuzhong. If I were to eat vegetarian food with the princess, I would probably be heartbroken.
No.
I am the first one who disagrees with this marriage. The regent looked calm and indifferent, like an outsider. He did not stand up to salute, his buttocks firmly glued to the chair, and he evaded the question in a perfunctory manner. My heart belongs to someone else. It must be fake. The emperor had not expected this. After a brief silence, he said, Pingyin is sensible and will be a good princess in the future. When you two get married, I will take your sweetheart home as my concubine. With a loud bang, the emperor's voice suddenly stopped. The regent frowned and slammed the porcelain cup he had been playing with for a long time onto the table. There was a violent look in his eyes. The corners of his eyes were bloodshot, and he didn't even want to pretend anymore. I only have one wife, Your Majesty. Please stop making such jokes. The emperor remained silent. I felt a little scared. This guy is incredibly brave. No wonder he has so many enemies. Just talk. Why is he pinching my wrist? His Majesty was very unhappy. Although he didn't say it directly, I could hear something from his heart-wrenching cough. I whispered to the regent, If he doesn't leave, he'll cough up his lungs. He brushed the corner of his robe with disdain, then calmly changed his hand to hold mine. Since Your Majesty is not in good health, I will take my leave now. After saying that, he pulled me and walked away. The emperor was left helpless and furious. 09. This man's words are extremely trustworthy. After leaving the bedroom, he sent someone to get the packed snacks. Then he took me to the pavilion to wait. In early autumn, the weather is not very cold. He stretched his long legs and looked at the unfinished chess game on the stone table, looking unusually relaxed. I asked him in a daze, When will the prince get married? The assassination plan had to be carried out sooner or later. I'd like to see which unlucky girl becomes a widow right after getting married. He raised his eyes to the sky. It's almost there. I asked again, Are you really not planning to take a concubine in the future? One widow is pitiful enough, but there must not be another one. He replied, There is an old rule in my family that those who are unfaithful to their wives must be stripped naked and thrown into a pig cage. I was shocked. Before I could learn more about his family's ancestral teachings, someone spoke up first. That's really interesting. I suddenly felt that the voice was familiar and turned to look. I saw a young man with a graceful posture striding forward. He was wearing a moon-white robe and a jade pendant with a pair of dragons playing with a pearl on his waist. My eyes narrowed slightly. It's him, my employer. Our eyes met in the air, and we felt a tacit understanding. Everything was self-explanatory, until the regent stood up and called out to him, Your Highness the Crown Prince. Pinch mom. Bullshit tacit understanding. This person's identity is so noble. I couldn't help but worry about the regent. Having offended his son and his father, can he really live to get married? The prince only chatted with him about family matters and kept winking at me before leaving. I used the excuse of going to the toilet to catch up with Prince Hongchong. He avoided the palace servants, wondering, How did you recognize me at the first sight? By the way, he was wearing a mask on the day we made the deal in Killer Hall. I pointed at his clothes and held my forehead helplessly. You are wearing the same clothes this time as last time. He suddenly realized, This makes sense. The prince was very satisfied with my performance. Although I haven't hurt the regent in the slightest, I have become a favorite in his eyes. He probed, How much does the regent trust you? I scratched my head and asked, Does lying in the same bed with him count as trust? Certainly. He looked excited and agreed with me on the time for the next assassination. He said that someone would be sent to hang a piece of red silk on the tree in the backyard of the palace. I clenched my fists secretly. Whether you can become a rising star in the killer world depends on this one move.
10.
It was evening when we left the palace. Coinciding with the Mid-Autumn Festival, a grand banquet was held in the palace. But I ate too much snack in the afternoon, and I felt a little uncomfortable. I couldn't even concentrate on watching the dance performed by the beautiful women from the western regions. The regent saw me holding my stomach with a depressed look on my face, so he only listened to the opening song and found an excuse to leave in a hurry. On the way back, I was bored and leaned against the window to look at the lanterns along the street, and I exclaimed in admiration from time to time. He was originally resting with his eyes closed, but when he heard me yelling, "Ah," again and again, he suddenly stopped the carriage. Go down and take a look? The streets were crowded with people, and he was afraid that I would get lost. So he put the corner of his sleeve into my hand. The hawkers' calls continued. I looked at them one by one and stopped in front of a stall selling sky lanterns. Many people were writing on it with brushes. I remembered my own dog-crying hands and stuffed the pen directly into the Regent's hands. Just right. You are the best martial artist in the world. Become rich and retire soon, have a caring husband, and live a peaceful and smooth life for the rest of your life. He paused while picking up the pen, and I stuck out my tongue. Is it too much? He laughed. No, speak slower. The Regent usually wrote in cursive script, which was a bit sloppy, but very consistent with his temperament. At this moment, he was extremely serious, and his writing was powerful and forceful, as if he particularly cherished these joking wishes of mine. Finally, he pointed to the blank space and asked me to write the words Sue ran. Then he handed over a new lamp. Write my name on it, too. I was stunned for a while, and suddenly remembered the folk rumors. Don't you say that if you let someone write your name, the gods will mistakenly think that you are helping that person fulfill their wish. Hearing this, he picked up my lamp and ran his fingers over the lines of small words on it. I think you're a little greedy, so it's not a bad idea to help you realize one or two of them.
2.
The Regent is rich, powerful, and influential. If you think about it carefully, he has everything. Now that things have come to this, if I don't write something, it would seem that I am somewhat ungrateful. So I took the pen, then put it down again, and said with tears in my eyes, I am not worthy to write your name, Your Majesty. He responded quickly, You don't know my name? I couldn't defend myself. I just forgot for a moment. He sighed softly, his long eyelashes hiding the emotions in his eyes, and suddenly held my hand. Behind this man was a river of thousands of lights that gradually rose up, and the orange-yellow light made his features look even more tender. I'll let you off this time, remember that. His palms were warm, and he guided me to write his name, Xia Wang, stroke by stroke. We played until late at night before returning home. The originally deserted side room was now packed with people. Xia Wang gave many excuses. One moment, he said the warehouse was full. The next he said there were no women in the house, and so he told me to take whatever I needed. I looked at the room full of silk and pearl hairpins and thought that the princess would have to buy for me in the future. There were 2 soft quilts on the bed, and I could smell the scent of sunshine. I lay on it, staring at the flickering candle in Xia Wang's bedroom. When I was half asleep, I suddenly thought that if I didn't want to be an assassin, it would be nice to be a parasite in his house.
Wrong.
I suddenly had an epiphany and sat up in shock from my dying illness. Why is his name Xia Wang? In my impression, the Regent's surname is clearly Chung. 11. I was exposed. On the day I had an appointment with the prince, I climbed all the trees but couldn't find the so-called red silk. I searched for him among the crowd for hundreds of times, and when I turned around, I found the silk lying in the dim light. Xia Wang was holding a big red bouquet in his hand, tossing it up and down, just like a groom. Looking for this? Me? I think, yeah. The shape was wrong. One line turned into a ball. I didn't dare to confirm it rashly. Xia Wang looked surprised and pulled out a note from the cluster of flowers. Then this is yours, too. Alarm bells rang in my heart, and I shook my head subconsciously. No. But I heard Xia Wang read clearly. Sue ran. Kill the Regent immediately. He smiled bitterly. Did the prince send you here? Admit it. I have seen the secret letter you sent. We are clearly having a face-to-face meeting. His eyes were deep, and he remained silent.
Gone.
Careless. I was put in a dungeon. When he was scolding the prince for being an idiot for the 100th time, Xia Wang arrived late with his guards. They walked right into the cell across from me. A bloody killer was nailed to the wooden frame. I don't know how much torture he had endured. It was hard to find a piece of intact skin and flesh on his body, and he kept begging for mercy. Xia Wang had a blank expression on his face, so noisy. With a wave of the knife, the piece of bright red tongue flew to my feet. I was immediately startled and threw myself against the pillar by the door, wailing at the top of my lungs. I really haven't killed anyone. Why don't I just quit the killer world right now? The next second, Xiaowang pinched my chin and stuffed a meatball into my mouth. I smacked my lips to stop crying. What? It tastes sweet, like the osmanthus candy balls sold by Aunt Wang on West Street. Xiaowang. Insect poison. I pretended to vomit, but he pinched my neck and forced me to swallow. He continued to threaten with a gloomy face. If you don't listen to me in the future, you will explode and die immediately. I shed tears on the spot. If you want me to obey, just say so. I will return the deposit paid by the prince right now. Why is it so necessary? I cried at the top of my lungs and glared at Xiaowang. A few seconds later, he again acted like a loser and asked the guards to open the iron door of the cell, and I ran out as if I was escaping. Don't lock me up anymore. I pointed at the corner and shivered. There's a rat in here. It scared me to death. Xiaowang was stunned for a moment, then patted my back with his palm and said in a hoarse voice, "Okay." I sobbed and looked up from his arms. This guy is really easy to control. 12. The prince and I parted ways. I thought I could be a full-time maid in the future, but I didn't expect Xiaowang to give me another portrait. This person was the imperial censor of the current dynasty. I met him once at the Mid-Autumn Palace banquet. Xiaowang said in a low voice, "You will be my best knife." Song Huai on the beam. ? I was suddenly entrusted with an important task. ? I held the map in my hand and left him one last word. Let me make it clear first. This is a different price. Xiaowang held his forehead and said, "When you come back, you can take any gold bricks in the storehouse." With his words, I am full of motivation. Besides, the guards at the censorate were much more lax than I thought. He swaggered into the dormitory through the back door, only to encounter a team of guards on patrol. I jumped into the bushes nearby with trepidation. Unexpectedly, the leading guard had excellent hearing and immediately came over following the sound. When our eyes met, my sword was stuck in its scabbard. I took the initiative. Wait for me to draw my sword first. Guard. It's a wild cat. As he was talking, another guard came over. Our eyes met, and I was still competing with the scabbard in wits and courage. Don't worry, What a wild cat. The two guards smiled at each other, then turned around and said to everyone, "We have almost finished our inspection here. Let's go back and rest." Yes, it's rare for the censor to go to bed early, so we don't have to work so hard. Is this people's job so easy? They can actually slack off together openly. But thanks to them, I followed the map and headed straight to the dormitory. The person on the bed was unaware when he broke into the room through the window. He paused in his thunderous snoring, turned over, and continued to sleep. It wasn't until I stabbed the tip of the knife into his heart that he let out a short cry of pain. I quickly cut his neck and rushed back to the palace before dawn. This was truly the easiest task I have ever completed. 13. I, Sue Ran, am a rising star in the killer world. The murder of the censor caused panic among the people, but I was the only one who was overwhelmed with emotion. I finally got rid of the title of last place, who knows. On this day, the regent went to the morning court as usual. When he came back, he was followed by an uninvited guest. Idiot Prince. The new and old employers appeared together, and I wasn't the one who was embarrassed. The prince was still as calm as the breeze and the moon, completely unaware of how much hurt his 11 words had caused me. To this day, I still feel like there are bugs crawling in my stomach from time to time. I didn't smile at him. It was Xiaowang who took the initiative to break the ice for us. He said, "Kill one more man for me." I immediately rushed over, covered his mouth, and winked at him desperately. Why is this guy so outspoken today? His enemies are still here. Unexpectedly, the prince agreed seriously. The sooner the better. I was slightly stunned, as if I had discovered something extraordinary. You too, are you in the same group? A bold idea came to me. The prince deliberately chose me, who had the weakest fighting power, to assassinate Xiaowang. This would both create the illusion that they were not in harmony and ensure that Xiaowang would not be hurt. So, this was a plan within a plan from the beginning. Xiaowang knew that my purpose in approaching him was not pure, but he still used various excuses to keep me here. When the time is right, he will let me get rid of those who oppose him. I held my head and went to pull Xiaowang. My head is itchy. It feels like a brain is growing. Since you have already discussed it, why are you feeding me the poisonous insects? Xiaowang scratched his nose guiltily. That is, Auntie Wang's osmanthus candy balls? I just knew it. Xiaowang saw me crying loudly that day and picked up a candy ball to comfort me. Seeing that I misunderstood, he said it was a poisonous insect just to make me obey him. I slumped in my chair, feeling that I couldn't win against him, and asked directly, "Who are you going to kill this time?" "Your Majesty." "Who?" My legs went weak, and I almost fell to the ground. "Confirm with the prince again." "Kill your father?" "This filial son." I pulled Xiaowang and said, "Shouldn't you ask Song Huai for a mission of this difficulty?"
Wrong.
Song Huai never tried to assassinate the emperor. How can I be so worthy? Xiaowang's eyes were deep. This last step can only be taken by you. Somehow, I vaguely smell a conspiracy. I waved my hands and backed away. I really can't do this. Then, I felt a pain in the back of my neck and fell straight down. Xiaowang held me in his arms. "Have a good sleep. When you wake up, you will know everything." 14. I always thought that I was a child abandoned by my parents. After all, they have never appeared once since I can remember. But it seems not to be the case. I had a very long dream. I also saw my younger self. In a water town in the south of the Yangtze River, I rode on my father's neck and visited the market. My mother held my hand loosely and held some snacks and candied haws in the other hand. She wiped the sweat off her father's face and asked him to walk slower with a sweet smile. Ran has fallen asleep on your head again. Please don't knock her off." The tall, handsome man pinched my leg, and when he saw that I had no reaction, he snorted twice. "She said she wanted to go back and play with brother Xiaowang, but look at her, she's sleeping better than a pig." The mother laughed and hit him. How can anyone say that about their own child? So what? My daughter, Su Mingzhi, is the cutest and most beautiful one, even if she is really a pig. The scene changed and I, a little older, was squatting in the yard watching others write. The boy in front of me was only a few years older than me, but he could already write beautiful official script. He carefully wrote down the following on the paper. "Shuran." "Thank you, Wang." He pointed at the words and said in a baby voice, "This is you, and this is me. When you have mastered your own name, I will teach you mine." I raised the brush. Okay. The scene changed again, and my father was wearing armor, seriously injured, and being detained in prison. "Your Majesty has some complaints about me, and Lord Chun has also reported me in front of the palace, saying that my achievements are too great to be feared by the emperor, and that I intend to raise an army to rebel." With tears in his eyes, he held my mother's hand tightly and entrusted her with this. "Take Ran and run as far as you can. If they accuse me of a crime today, they might search my house tomorrow." He was right, but the emperor acted faster than he expected. That afternoon, before we had time to pack our bags, we saw soldiers rushing in. The leader, Lord Chen, gave an indifferent order. "No matter if they are male or female, old or young, kill them all." Suddenly, flames shot up into the sky. My mother hid me in the cellar and tried her best to cover the entrance. It took me a whole day to finally crawl out. It was also on that day that my parents' bodies were hung on the city wall for public display. Crime. Treason. I remembered it all. Lord Chun is the censor who died at my hands. I never kill people for Xiaowang. I'm avenging myself. 15. I followed Xiaowang into the palace again. This time the feeling was completely different. The emperor is too ill to sit up. Even if I don't take action, he won't survive this winter. The imperial physician knelt before his bed and bowed to Xiaowang with extreme respect. The emperor has already taken today's medicine. Whether it is medicine or poison, it doesn't matter anymore. Xiaowang changed his name and endured for many years, just for this moment. I carried the sword through the curtains and finally placed it across the emperor's neck. He was so emaciated that he could no longer support the dragon robe embroidered with gold thread. His gray pupils were filled with death, staring blankly in my direction. I asked, "Do you still remember General Su Mingzhi?" He looked confused, closed his eyes, and smiled. "Too many people died at my hands. It doesn't matter." I exerted force with my hands, and warm blood spurted out from his neck. I whispered the last sentence to him. "Those people are waiting for you underground." Male protagonist extra. General Su next door gave birth to a younger sister. She slept in the cradle with her tiny hands and feet, steaming warm, and looked at me with her round grape eyes, without crying or making a fuss. I shyly hid behind my mother. He couldn't help but reach out and rub her chubby face. So cute. I wish it was my home. My mother said that I had clumsy hands and feet, and usually didn't let me hug her. But I clearly held it firmly. During those few times, Su Ran sucked his fingers and laughed. She obviously likes me too. Children always grow up quickly. On her first birthday, Uncle Su prepared a lottery ceremony. There was a large circle of things like abacus, seals, and the 4 treasures of a study. She was sitting in the middle in a pink dress and skirt, like a glutinous rice ball just out of the pot. She looked around blankly, then suddenly started to come to her senses and crawled quickly towards me. I looked at the drooling little man hanging on my leg and said helplessly, "Mom." Uncle Su laughed so hard that he couldn't straighten his back. When he carried her back, he laughed and scolded her for being a little pervert. My sister sat in that position again. She picked up the abacus, looked at it, and threw it away. He picked up the book, looked at it, and put it aside. He picked up the meat bun again, looked at it, took a bite, and threw it away. Finally, she flew to my legs again, with the unsharpened knife in hand. He grabbed the corner of my robe and never let go. I picked her up helplessly. He winked at his mother again. "Look, I told you, she likes me very much." After we got back, my mother jokingly said she wanted to arrange a marriage between me and Su Ran. She said that as long as we grow up, we can get married legally, just like her and her father. I stared at my toes shyly, thought about it, and decided to refuse. It is said that the love between men and women is even more obscure and difficult to understand than the ancient books I have read recently. Su Ran is still young and doesn't seem very smart. What if she doesn't like me that much in the future? She can speak now. The first word is neither father nor mother. It is delusion. Is this the same as Xiaowang's? Not necessarily. The dog outside her house was really noisy those days. Su Ran seems to have reached the age where dogs dislike her earlier than other children. Instead of going through the main gate, she insisted on climbing over the man-high wall. She was not afraid either, and she jumped down by flapping her short legs. As expected, he fell on his butt. I had a slight cold those days, and my voice was muffled. "Why didn't you come this morning?" Su Ran sat on the bed, shaking her head while eating the snacks in my room, and said incoherently, "I played in the mud with Qin Shaoa this morning." I turned over, feeling inexplicably suffocated, and hummed twice to show my dissatisfaction. "I'm going to sleep." She didn't react. I was neither sleeping nor not sleeping, so I just closed my eyes and took a nap. I don't know how much time passed before the bed beside me sank. Su Ran kicked off his shoes and flipped inside very skillfully. She held up her head and looked at me for a long while. When I thought my disguise had failed, she kissed me again. "Brother, you need to get well soon." Sit. How come she fell asleep? Still sleeping with his legs spread out. I stared blankly with my eyes wide open, touched the numb spot on my cheek, and tiptoed out of bed. "Mother." I ran to the backyard howling, held her hand, and said firmly, "I want to be engaged to Su Ran." My mother stopped me with what I said before. "What if she doesn't like you that much in the future?" The image of her playing with Qin Air suddenly flashed through my mind. Will she also smile and call him brother sweetly? Then we should arrange the marriage as soon as possible. She kissed me. If she doesn't take responsibility for me, then she is really a bad girl. My father and Uncle Su are both stationed at the border. It has been 2 years since I last came back. My mother said, since he didn't have time to go home, then take me there. Sue Ran stuffed several letters from home into my package and asked me to make sure to hand them over to Uncle Sue. I said depressedly, I'm going to be gone for several months this time. Don't you have anything to give me? She searched her body and pulled out a wooden bird from somewhere. It is round and looks like a free-range chicken at first glance. This was a toy that the housekeeper of the Sue family carved for her when she was 2 years old. After a few years, she polished her hair until it was shiny and glossy. She stuffed the bird into my hand, looking reluctant and saying, You must bring him back safely. No. What? She muttered, pouting. I was talking to the bird. My heart suddenly felt numb. In the second month at the border, I missed Sue Rand very much. My father was either in the training ground or in the military tent every day. He could only talk to me for a few minutes during dinner. Late that night, he hurried back to the military camp. Only then did I know that Uncle Sue had been urgently recalled by the court. I haven't seen him since that day. Even the letters sent from Jiangnan have stopped arriving. I was depressed for a few days, thinking that Sue Ran must be too happy and had forgotten about me, until I heard what my parents said outside the tent. He said, More than half of the generals in the army have been recalled by the court. The Hu people may attack at any time. He said, Your Majesty is killing a chicken to scare the monkeys and has put General Sue on a false charge. He also said, I'm afraid the Sue mansion can no longer be saved. My head was buzzing, and I rushed to the stable without looking back. Fortunately, I had some silver on me, and after pawning the jade pendant and hair crown, I had enough money to return to Jiangnan. I had to cut the journey of more than half a month in half. After running 4 horses to death, I finally stood in front of the Sue mansion. The heads of the 2 majestic stone lions had been chopped off. When one pushed the door open, all one saw were ruins. Sue Ran is not here. I searched for several days in the city. Finally, I found her in the alley next to the porridge shop. Her face was dirty, and she looked like a hungry little animal, drooling as she stared at the red bean porridge. He looked at me warily again. Who are you? I thought she was in shock and was temporarily unconscious, so I just asked her, What do you think? Then he took a clean towel and wiped her face. Why do you look like a little beggar? She clutched her torn shirt helplessly and whispered, Isn't that me? I stood there in a daze, and then realized belatedly that she didn't remember. She forgot that she was the beloved daughter of the famous General Sue and the most beloved girl in the Sue family. She is my engaged wife. She forgot everything. I can't guarantee that anyone is tracking her down. I could only take her to the next town to avoid the limelight. He used the remaining money he had to rent a small, shabby inn. Sue Ran is very well behaved. She munched on the steamed bun and kept saying it was delicious. I touched her head and felt mixed emotions when I recalled the look of disgust on her face when she said this thing would make her throat ache. I comforted her and told her that all problems would be solved once my parents came back. I do think so. But after waiting for nearly half a month, I still didn't get any news from them. Not only that, Xie's mansion was also sealed. While I was feeling fortunate that I did not bring Sue Ran back with me, I was trying to contact my father's confidants. They told me that the Hu people attacked the military camp at night, and my parents died at their hands. That night, I hugged Sue Ran and thought a lot. Killing the chicken to scare the monkeys, it turns out that the one being scared is the Xie family. 3 months after my parents died, I was adopted by the Prime Minister. It was changed to the name of his deceased son, Chung Han. I did all this just for revenge. The Prime Minister knows. So he taught me conspiracy theory. Also sent Sue Ran to a safe place. The killer hall was founded by him personally. When I was 14, he sent me to the military camp and retired to his hometown. At the age of 24, I became a prince of a different surname, holding most of the military power. The emperor saw that my ambition was growing, so he had no choice but to make Hong Chong the crown prince. He wants to benefit from it. But there has never been any competition between the prince and me. The prince wants the throne, but I just want him to die. Besides, the prince was very sincere when he approached me for cooperation that day. He said, "I am not the emperor's biological son." It seems that he and I are indeed the best allies. After everything was ready, the prince tricked Sue ran over. She worked hard sweeping the floor during the day and polished the heads of the stone lions in my house until they were shiny. He sneaked into my window at night and got stuck in the middle. I had no choice but to hold back my laughter and look up. Thief? The night outside the window is just right. I think we can finally prepare for our wedding.